My name is Hannah. I am 33 years old and a senior financial analyst. A year ago, while I was recovering from surgery in a sterile hospital room, I turned on the morning news. The reporter was covering a luxury cruise ship delayed in Miami. When the camera panned across the VIP deck, my heart stopped. There on the screen, holding champagne glasses and laughing, were my parents, my sister, and my husband, Greg. Feeling a sudden pit in my stomach, I checked my phone. A $28,500 charge for Oasis. Luxury charters had just hit my platinum credit card. I called my husband right then and there. I watched him answer on live television. "Where are you?" I asked. "At work in a big meeting," he whispered. I smiled a cold, detached smile. "Enjoy your meeting," I replied and hung up. Before I tell you exactly how I turned their dream vacation into a floating nightmare, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you believe the truth always catches up with liars. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is there. Now let me take you to the moment I woke up in that hospital bed. I opened my heavy eyes to the harsh fluorescent lights of an Orlando hospital room. My mouth tasted like dry cotton and bitter medication. A sharp burning pain radiated from my lower right abdomen every time I tried to draw a deep breath. The surgery had been on the calendar for a month. What was supposed to be a routine 90-minute procedure had turned into 6 hours and 2 units of blood when they found the infection. Now it was Friday morning. The room was freezing cold and smelled of iodine and bleach. I was alone. The vinyl visitor chair next to my bed was empty. There were no flowers sitting on the counter. There were no colorful get-well balloons tied to the bed rail. There was just the steady, rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor next to my head, tracking my solitary pulse. My husband Greg was supposed to be sitting in that chair holding my hand. When he dropped me at the admissions desk on Wednesday morning, he had kissed my forehead and promised he would be right behind me. But then he called the nurses' station a few hours after my surgery to say his consulting firm had an emergency board meeting. He claimed it was a critical make-or-break moment for his career. He promised he would be at the hospital by noon on Friday to bring me fresh clothes and take me home. I believed him. I always believed him. I am a senior financial analyst. I spend my days tracking millions of dollars for corporate clients. I find hidden discrepancies and balance complex ledgers. But when it came to my own family, I never checked the math. I just gave them everything they asked for. To distract myself from the throbbing pain in my stomach and the sinking feeling of loneliness, I reached for the plastic remote clipped to my bed rail. I turned on the television mounted high on the wall opposite my bed. The local morning news broadcast was playing. The anchors were smiling and bantering about the weekend weather forecast before transitioning to a light-hearted travel segment. It was a fluff piece about a minor port strike down in Miami that had temporarily delayed a massive luxury cruise ship from departing for the Bahamas. The reporter was standing on the sunlit dock, pointing up at the towering white vessel. The graphic at the bottom of the screen read, "Oasis Luxury Charters Port Delay." I watched with dull interest, adjusting the thin hospital blanket around my shivering shoulders. The camera crew had been granted access to walk along the upper decks to interview passengers who were waiting out the delay. The camera panned across the crystal-clear pool area. It showed wealthy passengers lounging in the morning sun. Then the camera operator moved up to capture the exclusive VIP deck overlooking the harbor. That is when my blood turned to ice. The throbbing pain in my abdomen completely vanished, replaced by a sickening drop in my chest. I blinked hard, rubbing my dry eyes, convinced the residual pain medication was making me hallucinate. But the high-definition screen did not lie. Standing on the teak wood balcony of a luxury suite, laughing loudly with crystal champagne glasses in their hands, was my entire family. I dragged myself up against the stiff pillows, wincing as my fresh surgical stitches pulled tight. I stared at the television screen in absolute disbelief. There was my father, Robert, wearing a brand new expensive linen shirt. There was my mother, Susan, throwing her head back in laughter while holding a mimosa. Standing next to them was my younger sister, Brittany, fixing her designer sunglasses and posing for her own phone camera. Her husband, Todd, was leaning casually against the brass railing, looking relaxed and sunburned, and right in the center of the group, holding a massive plate of tropical fruit, was my husband, Greg. Greg, who was supposed to be sitting in a stressful board meeting. Greg, who had hurriedly packed my hospital overnight bag before rushing off to work. They were not just on a spontaneous cruise. They were on a hyper-luxury private charter. They were smiling. They were celebrating. They were completely unbothered by the fact that I was lying in a hospital bed with an intravenous line in my arm after a life-threatening infection. For a long moment, I just sat there struggling to process the visual information. My logical brain tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was an old news clip. Maybe it was a family that just looked incredibly similar to mine. But then Brittany adjusted her wide-brimmed beach hat. It was the exact same custom-embroidered hat I had bought for her birthday just 2 weeks ago. It was them. They were in Miami. They were boarding a ship to the Caribbean while I was bleeding in an Orlando hospital. As I stared at Greg's smiling face on the screen, my cell phone buzzed loudly on the plastic tray table next to my bed. The sudden noise made me jump. I reached over and picked it up. My hands were shaking so violently I almost dropped the device onto the floor. It was an automated text message from my private bank. It was a high-priority fraud alert for my primary platinum credit card. The message asked me to verify a recent charge. The amount was $28,500. The merchant was listed as Oasis Luxury Charters. I stopped breathing. The oxygen seemed to drain completely out of the sterile hospital room. I scrambled to open my mobile banking app, pressing my thumb against the screen to unlock it. I navigated to my recent transactions. The massive cruise charge had been pushed through manually using my card number. My card. The card I kept securely locked in my home office safe. The card Greg had the combination to. I scrolled further down my recent transactions. There were several other large charges I had missed during the hazy blur of my surgery and recovery. $500 at a designer sunglass boutique, $2,000 for premium airline tickets to Miami, $800 at a high-end resortwear store. They had used my money to buy their vacation wardrobes. They had used my money to book a $28,000 VIP suite on a luxury ship. The realization hit me with the destructive force of a freight train. I have always been the silent financial pillar of my family. When my parents, Robert and Susan, fell dangerously behind on their mortgage last year, I quietly paid off the balance to save them from financial ruin and embarrassment at their local Methodist church. When Brittany wanted to start a glamorous lifestyle influencer business that generated zero income, I funded her camera equipment and her rent. When Greg needed seed money for his endless string of failing consulting startups, I drained my annual corporate bonuses to support his lofty dreams. I drove an older, sensible car so he could lease a luxury sedan. I worked 60-hour weeks so they could live comfortably. I gave them everything because I believed that family protects family. But looking at my depleted bank statement and looking at the television screen showing their joyful faces, I finally understood the devastating truth. I was not a beloved daughter. I was not a cherished sister. I was not Greg's equal partner in marriage. I was just their personal bank. I was a useful idiot who funded their lives. And they had collectively decided to rob the vault while the guard was incapacitated in a hospital bed. They knew exactly what they were doing. They planned this trip while I was working myself to the bone. The television reporter was still talking to the camera, wrapping up his segment about the port strike. In the background of the shot, I could clearly see Greg step away from the group to check his phone. I looked down at my own phone. A cold, absolute rage replaced every ounce of shock and physical pain in my body. The tears that had threatened to fall completely dried up. I did not cry. I did not scream. I am a senior financial analyst. I deal in hard facts and cold numbers. And the numbers told me my entire family had conspired to exploit me. I pressed Greg's contact name on my screen and put the phone to my ear. On the television screen, I watched Greg look down at his device. I watched his face change. I watched him hold up a finger to my parents, signaling that he needed to take a call. He walked further away from the group, moving closer to the edge of the news camera's frame. He raised his phone to his ear. There was a 2-second delay between my phone and the live broadcast. The line connected. "Hey, honey," he said. His voice was hushed and urgent. He sounded exactly like a stressed man sitting in a quiet corporate boardroom. "How are you feeling?" My voice was incredibly steady. It did not shake at all. "I am fine," I said. "I am just lying here watching the morning news. Where are you?" I watched him on the screen. He turned his back to the news camera, looking out at the beautiful blue Miami harbor. "I am at work," he said smoothly, without a single hesitation. "I am in that big meeting I told you about. We are going over the quarterly projections right now. It is really intense, but I am trying to wrap it up so I can drive to the hospital. Do you need anything at all?" I watched my mother Susan walk up behind him on the television and hand him a fresh glass of champagne. He took it without looking back, still speaking lies into the phone. I smiled. It was a cold, detached smile that did not reach my eyes. "No," I whispered softly into the receiver. "I do not need anything. Enjoy your meeting, Greg." I ended the call immediately. I watched him look at his phone on the television screen, looking slightly confused by my abruptness before turning back to join my laughing family. He took a long sip of the champagne I had unknowingly paid for. He thought I was just a naive, workaholic wife sedated in a hospital bed recovering from surgery. He thought he had successfully pulled off the ultimate financial heist with the full blessing and participation of my parents and sister. He had absolutely no idea that he had just handed a forensic financial expert the exact time-stamped evidence she needed to destroy his entire life. I set my phone down on the tray table. The pain in my abdomen was nothing compared to the fire burning in my chest. I had 72 hours before that ship docked again, and I was going to use every single minute to legally dismantle their world. I set my cell phone down on the plastic tray table and shifted my heavy body on the stiff hospital mattress, immediately wincing as a sharp, burning line of fire flared across my surgical incision. The sterile room was deathly quiet except for the steady, rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor tracking my solitary pulse. I needed a larger screen to properly review my complex banking statements and securely lock down my compromised accounts. I reached down toward the floor, where a faded canvas tote bag was resting against the cold metal leg of the vinyl visitor chair beside my bed. Before Greg left for his supposed emergency board meeting, he had packed that bag in a frantic, disorganized rush on Wednesday morning while I was looking for my insurance card. He had stood in the brightly lit hallway looking appropriately terrified and told me he was grabbing my Kindle so I would have something to distract me during my long physical recovery. I pulled the heavy rectangular object from the main compartment of the tote bag and laid it flat on my lap. It was not my Kindle, it was his silver iPad Pro. In his hurried rush to play the role of the deeply concerned husband, he had blindly grabbed the wrong electronic device from our bedside table and carelessly tossed it in with my spare clothes. I stared at the glossy black screen reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital ceiling. My husband is a man who relies heavily on his natural charisma because he completely lacks any basic attention to detail. He never updates his software. He never bothers to log out of his personal accounts, and he is absolutely terrible with remembering numbers. I pressed the circular home button at the bottom of the glass screen. The display lit up immediately, asking for a 6-digit numerical passcode. I did not even have to hesitate or think about it. I typed in his birth month, his birthday, and the year we got married. The screen unlocked in a fraction of a second, granting me unrestricted access to his entire digital life. My immediate and only goal was to access our shared banking portal and completely freeze the Platinum credit card they were currently using to buy expensive tropical cocktails on a floating luxury resort. I navigated to the finance folder on his second home screen and tapped the familiar blue banking application icon. The facial recognition software failed because I was not Greg, so the application prompted me for the manual master password. Once again, I typed his highly predictable combination of his mother's maiden name and his favorite professional sports team. The financial dashboard loaded a few seconds later, displaying our checking, savings, and credit accounts in neat little organized rows. Seeing those precise numbers clearly lined up on the digital screen triggered a massive wave of nausea that had nothing to do with my recent surgery. The balance in my personal emergency savings account was dangerously low. It was a direct and painful result of being the primary financial pillar for an entire family that viewed my hard work as their personal community bank vault. I stared at the drained savings balance, and the vivid memories of every single financial sacrifice I had ever made for them rushed into my mind, completely suffocating me in that sterile room. Just 14 short months ago, I had drained over $65,000 from that exact savings account to completely pay off my parents' residential mortgage. My father, Robert, and my mother, Susan, had mismanaged their retirement investment funds so badly they were facing imminent aggressive foreclosure on the beautiful suburban house I grew up in. They were both prominent, highly visible members of our local Methodist church. My mother served as the head of the hospitality committee, organizing weekly bake sales and charity drives, while my father was a universally respected deacon who greeted the congregation at the front doors every single Sunday morning. The terrifying thought of losing their beautiful home to the bank and facing public humiliation in front of all their wealthy church friends terrified them more than anything else in the entire world. I remember the exact rainy night they came over to my house. They sat at my kitchen table weeping uncontrollably into their coffee cups. My father could not even look me in the eye out of deep shame, while my mother tightly grasped my hands, begging me to save their pristine reputation. They told me I was their absolute only hope in the world. They told me that family always protects family, no matter the personal cost. I wrote that massive check the very next morning. I completely sacrificed my own financial security and drastically delayed my own retirement plans, just so my parents could continue to walk into Sunday service with their heads held high and their pride completely intact. I dragged my index finger across the smooth glass screen, navigating directly to the credit card management portal on the iPad. The display instantly showed the $28,500 pending charge for the luxury cruise charter, sitting right at the very top of the ledger. Seeing that massive, undeniable number positioned right next to the long, endless list of Greg's other recent business expenses made my chest ache with a dull, heavy, throbbing pressure. For 5 long, exhausting years, I had been the sole reliable funding source for his endless string of failing corporate consulting startups. Greg was always entirely convinced he was just one perfect pitch away from becoming a tech millionaire. He constantly claimed he needed a leased luxury sedan to properly impress potential corporate clients. He claimed he desperately needed high-end laptop computers, expensive steakhouse lunches, and premium downtown office space rentals, just to project the correct image of a wildly successful entrepreneur. None of those highly funded business ventures ever turned a single dollar of actual profit. Every single time a venture inevitably collapsed under the massive weight of his sheer incompetence, he would come crying to me with a brand new business plan and a heartbreaking story about how nobody else in the harsh business world believed in his unique vision. I believed in him. I worked grueling 60-hour weeks as a senior financial analyst, tracking millions of dollars for corporate clients and finding hidden tax savings just so I could funnel my hard-earned annual bonuses directly into my husband's pipe dreams. I faithfully paid all our household bills while he constantly played dress-up as a powerful businessman. I tapped the account management tab, preparing to navigate to the security settings and lock the credit card entirely. But right below the pending cruise charter charge, I noticed a recurring monthly bank transfer of $1,500. The automatic transfer was labeled with a very familiar name. It was going directly to my younger sister, Brittany. I closed my eyes tightly and took a slow, ragged breath, inhaling the sharp chemical scent of the hospital room. Brittany was the undisputed golden child of our entire family. She was 26 years old, remarkably beautiful, highly charismatic, and utterly convinced she was naturally destined for internet fame. She desperately wanted to be a prominent luxury lifestyle influencer. But living a luxury lifestyle requires significant capital she simply did not possess and absolutely refused to work a normal job for. My parents had firmly convinced me years ago that since I had a stable, lucrative corporate career, it was my absolute moral duty as an older sister to help Brittany achieve her big dreams. For the past 2 full years, I had been quietly paying the rent on her trendy, expensive downtown apartment. I bought her professional studio ring lights, expensive digital camera equipment, and massive designer clothing hauls, just so she could film glamorous unboxing videos for an online audience that barely even existed. I gave her a completely free ride through her 20s, while I spent mine buried under mountains of financial spreadsheets. I gave my family everything they ever asked for, and they thanked me by booking a VIP vacation on my dime while I was being sliced open by a surgeon. I finally located the emergency freeze card toggle switch on the banking application interface. I hovered my index finger over the smooth glass, ready to slide the digital button and cut off their funding permanently. I wanted them financially stranded at the port. I wanted their dream luxury trip to grind to an immediate, humiliating halt right there on the sunny deck of that massive ship. But a fraction of a second before my finger could complete the downward motion, a small notification banner dropped down from the top edge of the iPad screen, completely blocking my view. It was an incoming iMessage. Because Greg was so careless with his technology, he had linked his cellular phone and his tablet to the exact same Apple ID account. His text messages were currently syncing in real time over the hospital's free wireless internet network. The message was from a group chat titled Family Vacay, with a little green palm tree emoji at the very end of the text. The sender was my mother, Susan. I stared deeply at the preview text displayed in the white banner. The cruel words burned themselves permanently into my vision. The message read, "Make sure you order the premium drink package, Greg, because Hannah's card has a huge limit, so we might as well max it out before she checks her bank statements next week." My thumb froze in midair, hovering over the banking app. A cold, damp sweat broke out across my forehead and ran down the back of my neck. I tapped the notification banner, and the full thread expanded across the high-definition screen. The group chat was titled Family Vacay, and it had been active for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. I did not scroll yet. I simply stared at the sheer length of the conversation, at the endless stack of blue and green bubbles running up past the top edge of the display, and I felt something cold and structural shift inside my chest. A spontaneous trip does not generate 3 weeks of messages. A moment of weakness does not require a group chat. This was not a husband who had panicked and made one terrible decision while his wife was in surgery. This was a plan. It had a timeline, and I was somewhere inside it. My thumb was still hovering over the freeze card toggle. One tap and the card would die in Greg's pocket, and my entire family would be stranded on a luxury deck with no way to pay for lunch. It would feel incredible. It would also tell them within about 90 seconds that I was awake and that I was watching. I pulled my thumb back. I am a senior financial analyst. I have spent my entire career auditing corporate ledgers, and the first rule of forensic work is that you never move on a discrepancy until you understand the full scope of it. You do not freeze one account when there might be 6. You do not spook the subject before you have the paper trail. Whatever they had spent on that ship, I was suddenly and completely certain that it was not the largest number in this file. I closed the banking application. I opened the group chat, scrolled all the way back to the very first message, and started reading. My fingers were surprisingly steady as I scrolled. The bright blue and green text bubbles stretched endlessly upward, documenting every single conversation they had shared behind my back. I stopped scrolling when I reached a date stamp from exactly 3 weeks ago. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The exact same afternoon I had sat in my doctor's office and received the official schedule for my procedure. My mother, Susan, had sent the first message in the chain. "Is Hannah's surgery officially scheduled for the 14th?" she asked. Greg had replied just 2 minutes later, confirming the date. The next message from my mother made my breath catch in my throat. "Perfect," she wrote. "That gives us a long weekend while she is stuck in the hospital recovery ward. Just use her card because she will be too drugged up to notice the bank alerts." I read those 2 sentences over and over again. My own mother, the woman who had held me as a child, had carefully calculated the exact window of my physical vulnerability. She had factored in my surgical schedule and my heavy pain medication, just to figure out the most optimal time to steal from me. She knew I would be lying alone in a hospital bed attached to intravenous lines and monitors. She knew I would be weak and confused and entirely isolated, and she viewed my life-threatening medical emergency as the perfect opportunity to book a tropical vacation. I shifted my weight on the stiff hospital mattress, feeling the pull of my fresh stitches, but I did not stop reading. I forced myself to keep scrolling down through the timeline. A few days after my mother's initial message, my younger sister Brittany had entered the chat. Brittany was always focused entirely on her own image. She wanted to be a famous internet personality, and she demanded that everyone around her fund that specific lifestyle. I tapped on a long paragraph she had written to the group. "I desperately need new aesthetic content for my Instagram page," Brittany complained. "My follower count is dropping because I have not posted any luxury travel content in months. If we do not upgrade to the premium VIP suite with the private wraparound balcony, I will not have any good natural lighting for my photos. This entire trip will be a massive waste of my time if I cannot get decent pictures for my sponsors. Mom, you need to tell Greg to pay for the premium upgrade." I scoffed out loud in the empty room. My sister was demanding that my husband use my stolen credit card to buy her better lighting for her imaginary internet career. I waited for my parents to tell her she was being greedy or unreasonable. Instead, my father Robert chimed in. "Listen to your sister, Greg," my father wrote. "We are already going all the way down to Miami for this. We might as well do it right and get the best rooms available on the ship. Hannah has plenty of room on that platinum card." I kept swiping downward, tracing the timeline of their escalating greed. Greg had responded to my father's message a few hours later. His reply was long and detailed, and it completely stopped the breath in my lungs. "Do not worry about the high cost of the VIP suite," Britt Gregg reassured her. "The $28,000 charge for the charter is just the deposit. I have much bigger plans. I got the massive home equity line of credit approved on her house today. I used that digital notary stamp I told you guys about to forge her signature on the final closing documents. The bank did not suspect a thing. Once we get back from the Bahamas, I am taking my entire half of the cash equity out of the joint accounts, and I am filing the divorce papers immediately. Let her drown in the debt. It is what she deserves for holding me back all these years." I dropped the tablet onto my lap. My hands were shaking so violently that I could not hold the device steady anymore. A home equity line of credit. A HELOC. As a senior financial analyst, I knew exactly how dangerous those financial instruments could be. They allowed a homeowner to borrow massive amounts of cash against the paid-off value of their property. I had spent 7 exhausting years aggressively paying down the mortgage on my beautiful suburban home. I had poured every single annual bonus and every extra dollar of my salary into that house so that we would have a secure future. I owned it free and clear. It was my greatest financial achievement and my only real safety net in the world. And Greg had just stolen it. He had conspired with a corrupt digital notary to digitally forge my legal signature on banking documents. He had taken out a massive loan against the entire value of my home without my knowledge or consent. He had turned my completely paid-off house into a massive mountain of debt. And he fully intended to take all of that borrowed cash, transfer it into his own private accounts, and then serve me with divorce papers. I was going to walk away a wealthy man while I was left holding a forged mortgage I could never afford to pay back. I kept searching through the group chat, pulling up the photos they had sent to each other during their planning phase. There was a picture of my mother trying on expensive designer swimwear in a high-end boutique. I know Hannah hates when I spend money on myself. My mother had captioned the photo, but since she is buying, I decided to get the matching silk cover-up too. My father had replied with a picture of a brand new set of custom golf clubs. "I am going to test these out on the ship's private driving range," he wrote. "Just make sure you hide the receipts, Greg, before she gets out of the hospital. We do not want her throwing one of her dramatic little tantrums about the budget." I stared at the screen, feeling a cold disgust wash over me. Dramatic little tantrums. That was how my father described my desperate attempts to keep our family financially afloat over the years. When I begged them to stop overdrawing their accounts when I worked overtime to pay off their mounting credit card debts, they simply viewed me as an annoying obstacle to their luxury lifestyle. They felt entirely entitled to my money. They genuinely believed that my sole purpose on this earth was to fund their endless consumer desires. I opened another text thread, this one a private direct message between Greg and my mother. It was dated just 2 days before my surgery. "Susan, I need you to keep Hannah distracted this weekend," Greg had written. "I need to meet with the title company to finalize the HELOC paperwork, and I cannot have her asking questions about where I am." My mother had responded within seconds. "Do not worry, Greg. I will tell her I am feeling sick, and I need her to come over and help me clean the house. She will spend the whole day scrubbing my floors, and she will not suspect a thing. Make sure you get that cash secured. I cannot wait to sip margaritas on that balcony." I closed the text application and placed the tablet on the tray table. The sheer calculated cruelty of their plan was almost difficult to comprehend. My mother had feigned an illness to force me into performing free manual labor at her house, just so my husband could sneak away and legally steal my home equity. They had coordinated my exploitation with absolute military precision. The hospital room felt like it was closing in on me. The steady rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor next to my bed suddenly seemed deafeningly loud. I closed my eyes and tried to force air into my seizing lungs. I pictured my family standing on the deck of that luxury ship right now. I pictured my mother holding her champagne glass and my father wearing his new resort clothes. I pictured Brittany posing for photographs in the premium suite I was paying for. They were laughing and celebrating because they thought they had won. They thought they had successfully executed the perfect financial crime against a woman they viewed as nothing more than a gullible target. They expected me to wake up from my surgery in a haze of pain and confusion. They expected me to return to a house that was secretly mortgaged to the hilt. They expected me to blindly pay the credit card bills for their luxury vacation, while Greg quietly packed his bags and finalized his exit strategy. They thought I would just cry and beg and eventually accept my total financial ruin because I had always been the quiet, obedient daughter who kept the peace at any cost. I opened my eyes and stared at the sterile white ceiling of my hospital room. I did not cry. I did not shed a single tear for my husband or my parents or my sister. The heavy pain medication that had been making me feel hazy and sluggish completely cleared from my system. The shock and the betrayal burned away in an instant, leaving nothing behind except the ice-cold, calculating fury of a senior financial analyst. I am a woman who tracks hidden corporate assets for a living. I spend my days auditing complex ledgers, untangling massive financial webs, and destroying people who commit fraud. I picked the tablet back up from the tray table. My hands were completely steady now. I did not feel like a victim anymore. I felt like a predator who had just been handed the keys to the cage. I looked at Greg's written confession again. I got the HELOC approved on her house today. I used that digital notary stamp. It was a clear, undeniable written admission of felony wire fraud and forgery. And my parents and sister had responded to his message with laughing emojis and cheering text bubbles, proving that they were active, willing co-conspirators in a federal financial crime. I realized with absolute crystal clarity that my entire family was conspiring to leave me completely bankrupt and homeless. They had actively planned to strip me of every single asset I had ever worked for and throw me out into the street. They had declared total financial war on me while I was bleeding on an operating table. But they had made one catastrophic mathematical error in their grand plan. They had left a massive digital paper trail on a synced device that was currently sitting in the hands of a forensic financial expert. I swiped out of the text message application and opened the primary web browser on the tablet. I did not have time to sit in this hospital bed and feel sorry for myself. I did not have time to mourn the family I thought I had. I had less than 72 hours before that massive home equity loan transferred into Greg's private accounts. I had to move faster than they did. I had to freeze the assets, lock the accounts, and build an airtight legal case before that luxury cruise ship ever returned to the port of Miami. I began typing web addresses into the browser, pulling up the regional banking portals and the county property records. I was going to track every single penny they had stolen, and I was going to use their own digital footprints to lock them all in a federal prison. I tapped the Safari browser icon on the smooth glass screen and navigated straight to our shared Google Drive account. Greg always used this cloud storage drive to organize the endless paperwork for his string of failed corporate consulting businesses. I bypassed the digital folders labeled with his old startup ideas and scrolled rapidly down the page. I stopped immediately when I found a brand new folder created just 2 weeks ago. It was titled Horizon Legacy. I tapped the folder and held my breath as the contents loaded over the hospital wireless network. Inside were dozens of high-resolution scanned PDF documents. I tapped the first file named Closing Disclosures. The document filled the bright screen. I placed my thumb and index finger on the glass and zoomed in on the top left corner of the paperwork. The lender was listed as one of the largest national banks in the country. The borrowers were listed as Gregory and Hannah. The property address secured by the loan was my house. It was the beautiful suburban house I had spent 7 exhausting years paying off early with my own corporate salary and annual bonuses. I scrolled down to the financial summary table. It was a home equity line of credit. The principal amount approved was $150,000. I stared at the bold numbers printed in the approval box. $150,000 borrowed against the completely paid-off equity of my property. I dragged my finger across the screen to check the terms of the loan. The interest rate was listed at 8.5% adjustable. Greg had saddled me with a massive high-interest debt obligation while I was lying unconscious on an operating table. I swiped to the next page of the disclosure packet. I needed to see the signature line. My heart hammered violently against my ribs as the final page loaded. There on the bottom line was my signature. It looked absolutely perfect. The loops and angles matched the exact signature I used on all our joint tax documents. But I had never signed this piece of paper. I had been in the hospital getting emergency blood work drawn on the exact date printed at the top of the page. I zoomed in closer on the blue ink of the signature. As a senior financial analyst, I examine corporate documents every single day. I know how to spot a digital fabrication. The ink did not bleed into the paper grain. It was a high-quality digital stamp placed perfectly over the signature line. I dragged my finger across the smooth glass to examine the mandatory notary section at the bottom of the page. The notary seal belonged to a man named Thomas Jenkins. I knew that name perfectly well. Thomas was a licensed title agent who played golf with my father, Robert, every single Sunday morning at the municipal course. My father had actively brought his golfing buddy into this conspiracy. Thomas had illegally stamped the forged closing documents, completely bypassing the required in-person identity verification laws. This was not just a cruel family betrayal. This was a highly coordinated federal crime involving a licensed real estate professional. The heavy wooden door of my hospital room swung open with a loud click. I immediately pressed the home button on the tablet, turning the screen black. I slid the device under my thin hospital blanket, just as a young nurse walked in carrying a plastic tray of medications. She smiled warmly at me and set the tray down on the rolling table. "How is your pain level this afternoon, Hannah?" she asked, pulling a blood pressure cuff from her pocket. I forced the muscles in my face to relax. I painted a tired, grateful smile across my mouth. "It is much better now, thank you," I replied, keeping my voice soft and weak. "Just a dull ache." She wrapped the stiff cuff around my bare arm and inflated it. "Your husband called the front desk about an hour ago," she said, checking the digital monitor on the wall. "He said his meeting is running very late, and he asked us to make sure you were comfortable. He sounded so worried about you." I kept my smile perfectly frozen in place. "He is a very dedicated worker," I said smoothly. The cuff deflated with a soft hiss. The nurse charted my numbers on her clipboard, handed me 2 white pills in a small paper cup, and poured me a fresh glass of ice water. "You just get some rest," she said, patting my shoulder gently. "The doctor will be in to check your surgical incision before dinner." I swallowed the pills, thanked her, and waited for the heavy door to close completely. The moment the latch clicked shut, I pulled the tablet out from under the blanket and woke the screen back up. I could not afford to waste a single second resting. I closed the forged property disclosure file and tapped the next PDF in the folder. It was a corporate operating agreement for a newly registered limited liability company called Horizon Legacy Holdings. I read through the articles of incorporation with ice-cold precision. The managing members with full financial control were listed as Greg and my father, Robert. My mother, Susan, was listed as the corporate secretary. My sister, Brittany, was listed as a non-voting silent partner with a 10% equity stake. My name was completely absent from the corporate charter. They had built a brand new legal entity designed exclusively to hold the stolen money. To be absolutely certain, I opened a new browser tab and navigated to the State Division of Corporations website. I typed the company name into the public registry search bar. The official state records loaded instantly. The registered agent address for the new company was listed as the residential home of my brother-in-law, Todd. The entire family was officially on the corporate paperwork. They were all legally tied to the fraud. I returned to the shared drive and opened the final document in the folder. It was an automated clearinghouse wire transfer request form. The document instructed the National Bank to transfer the entire $150,000 balance from the new home equity line of credit directly into the corporate checking account of Horizon Legacy Holdings. I dragged my finger down to the processing date stamped at the bottom of the wire request form. Monday. The transfer was officially scheduled to execute on Monday morning at 8 o'clock Standard Eastern Time. I looked at the digital clock mounted on the sterile white wall of my hospital room. It was currently 2:15 on Friday afternoon. The bank would hold the massive wire transfer over the weekend for standard federal fraud prevention clearance. That meant the cash was currently sitting in a pending holding status. It had not moved into their private corporate account yet. I needed absolute confirmation of the pending status. I picked up my cell phone from the plastic tray table. I opened a new browser tab and searched for the National Bank's automated customer service number. I dialed the toll-free number and held the phone to my ear, listening to the robotic voice prompt. "Please enter your account number or social security number," the voice instructed. I typed my 9-digit social security number into the keypad. "Please enter the zip code associated with your property," the voice asked. I typed in my home zip code. The system processed the information for 3 agonizing seconds. "We have located one active home equity line of credit," the robotic voice announced cheerfully. "Your current available balance is $0. You have one pending wire transfer in the amount of $150,000 scheduled to clear on Monday. If you would like to speak to a representative, press 0. I hung up the phone immediately. The digital paperwork on the tablet matched the bank servers perfectly. The theft was already in motion. I set my phone down and went back to work on the tablet. I could not risk Greg realizing he had left his device behind and remotely wiping the hard drive from his phone while sitting on the cruise ship. I needed to secure every single piece of evidence immediately. I opened the Safari browser again and quickly created a brand new secure email address using a heavily encrypted server. I did not use my name or any identifiable information in the email address. I opened the Horizon Legacy folder and selected every single PDF document. The forged closing disclosures, the corporate operating agreement, the state registry files, the wire transfer request, and the fraudulent digital notary stamps. I attached them all to a new email and sent them to my encrypted address. I watched the blue progress bar slide across the top of the screen, ensuring every single file was successfully delivered to my private server. Next, I navigated back to the synced text messages on the tablet. I opened the group chat titled Family Vacay. I scrolled to the very top of the conversation where my mother had first suggested booking the luxury cruise while I was incapacitated in the hospital. I highlighted the entire text thread. Hundreds of messages documenting their premeditated conspiracy, their jokes about my surgery, their complaints about the cost of premium drink packages, and Greg's clear written confession about stealing my home equity. I copied the entire text log and pasted it into a second email. I hit send and watched the progress bar slide across the screen again until the evidence was safely transmitted, just to be absolutely safe. I picked up my cell phone, opened the camera application, and took clear, high-resolution photographs of the tablet screen displaying the most damning text messages and the forged signature on the loan document. I made sure to capture the digital timestamps on every single message. If Greg managed to wipe the tablet remotely, I now had digital copies securely stored in 3 different locations. The evidence was completely untouchable. I lowered the tablet and rested my head back against the stiff hospital pillows. The sharp pain in my abdomen pulsed with my racing heartbeat, but I ignored it. The entire scope of their operation was now laid out perfectly in front of me. They had used the distraction of my surgery to push the forged loan documents through the final approval process with the corrupt title agent. They used my stolen platinum credit card to pay the $28,000 deposit for the luxury cruise charter, so they could get out of town and establish a solid alibi while the massive wire transfer processed over the weekend. They planned to spend the next 3 days drinking premium champagne in the Bahamas, while the bank cleared the $150,000 theft. By the time their massive ship docked back at the port of Miami on Monday morning, the money would be safely secured in their hidden corporate account. Greg would immediately drain his half of the stolen cash and hand me divorce papers. My parents would take their half and finally have the lavish retirement cash they had always demanded from me. Brittany would get her 10% cut to fund her fake influencer lifestyle, and I would be left completely bankrupt holding a forged mortgage I could never afford to pay back on a single income. My credit score would be destroyed. My financial independence would be completely eradicated. They had designed a trap meant to bury me alive. I looked at the digital clock on the wall one more time. The red numbers flipped to 2:30. I had exactly 72 hours before that luxury ship docked at the Miami port. I had exactly 72 hours before the National Bank opened its corporate doors on Monday morning and released the pending wire transfer to the fraudulent limited liability company. They thought they had trapped me in this hospital bed. They thought my physical recovery would keep me completely isolated and unaware until it was far too late to stop them. They forgot who I am. They forgot that I am a senior financial analyst who destroys fraudulent corporate ledgers for a living. I track hidden money across international borders. I dismantle complex financial crimes for massive corporate clients, and my family had just handed me their entire sloppy paper trail on a silver platter. I picked up my cell phone again and opened my contact list. I was not going to cry over losing a family that never truly loved me. I was not going to shed a single tear for a husband who viewed me as nothing more than an asset to be liquidated. I was going to use the next 72 hours to stop that wire transfer, completely strand them on that ship, and secure my entire future before they even realized the war had begun. I opened the encrypted email server on my tablet and forwarded the entire digital evidence file to my personal work address before picking up my cell phone. I navigated straight to my professional contact list. I bypassed the standard 1-800 customer service numbers that regular retail consumers are forced to use when they have a problem. As a senior financial analyst who handles massive corporate accounts and forensic audits, I have direct access to the banking executives who actually control the flow of money. I scrolled down to the letter H and found the direct office line for William Hastings. William is the regional director of fraud operations for the exact national bank holding my forged home equity line of credit. We had worked closely together on a complex corporate embezzlement case 2 years ago, and we had a deep mutual respect for each other. I pressed the green call button and held the phone to my ear, listening to the crisp ringtone. William answered on the second ring. "William Hastings speaking," he said in his familiar, sharp, professional tone. "William, it is Hannah," I said, keeping my voice entirely steady, despite the sharp, throbbing pain radiating from my surgical incision. "I need an immediate emergency hard freeze on a fraudulent home equity line of credit that was opened using a forged digital signature." There was a split second of silence on the line as William shifted instantly from casual pleasantries into high-alert banking security mode. "Hannah," he asked, sounding deeply concerned, "are you talking about a corporate client account or your personal account?" "I am talking about my personal residential property," I replied, gripping the plastic edge of my hospital tray table. "My husband and my parents conspired with a corrupt local title agent to forge my signature on the closing disclosures. They took out $150,000 against my paid-off equity. The funds are currently sitting in a pending wire transfer scheduled to execute on Monday morning at 8 o'clock. I need you to kill that wire right now." "Give me your social security number," William demanded. I could hear his heavy fingers flying across his mechanical keyboard in the background. I recited my 9-digit social security number and provided my primary property zip code to bypass his internal security screen. I listened to the rapid clicking of his keyboard for 10 agonizing seconds as he pulled up the back-end financial ledgers. "I see it," William finally said, his voice dropping an octave. "I am looking at the pending automated clearinghouse wire transfer. It is routed to a newly established limited liability company called Horizon Legacy Holdings. That company is fraudulently registered to my brother-in-law," I explained rapidly. "My husband Greg and my father Robert are listed as the managing members. The title agent who placed the fraudulent digital notary stamp on the final disclosure packet is a man named Thomas Jenkins. I have already secured all the digital evidence, including written text message confessions from my husband directly admitting to the forgery." William let out a low, sharp breath. "Hannah, this is a massive federal violation because the amount exceeds $10,000 and involves interstate digital banking systems. This instantly triggers a suspicious activity report with the Federal Financial Crimes Enforcement Network." "Trigger the report," I said without a single ounce of hesitation. "I want the maximum federal response." "I am locking the wire transfer right now," William said. The keystrokes echoed loudly through the phone speaker. "The $150,000 transfer is officially frozen in a holding status. It will not clear on Monday morning. I am flagging the receiving corporate account for suspected wire fraud, and I am routing the forged closing documents directly to our internal legal department for immediate review. Your home equity is completely secured, Hannah. The bank will not release a single penny to them." I let out a long, slow breath, feeling the massive, crushing weight of that fraudulent debt instantly lift off my chest. "Thank you, William," I whispered. "Now I need you to look at my primary platinum credit card. My husband stole the physical card from my home safe. There is a pending charge of $28,500 for Oasis Luxury Charters. He is currently using it to fund a VIP vacation in the Bahamas for my parents and my sister. I need a hard lock on that credit line effective immediately. Decline all future transactions." "I am looking at the ledger now," William said. "I see the cruise charter deposit and several other high-end retail transactions processed over the last 48 hours. I am executing a complete account freeze. The card is officially dead. Any merchant attempting to run that number will receive a code 04 indicating a stolen card and instructing them to retain the physical plastic. I am also locking his digital portal access. He will not even be able to log into the mobile banking application to see why the card is declining. Your husband is about to have a very difficult weekend." "That is exactly what I am counting on," I replied. William assured me he would personally oversee the fraud investigation on Monday morning and promised to keep my personal accounts under maximum security surveillance. We ended the call. I placed my cell phone down on the sterile hospital bed sheets and picked up the silver tablet again. Securing my home equity and locking the stolen credit card was only the first phase of my defensive strategy. I needed to completely cut off their alternative funding sources before they realized the primary well had run dry. I opened the Safari browser and navigated to a different regional banking portal. 4 years ago, I had established a joint emergency savings account for my parents, Robert and Susan. They had a long history of terrible financial mismanagement and constantly called me weeping about unpaid utility bills or unexpected car repairs. To protect them from high-interest payday loans, I had deposited $40,000 of my own corporate salary into a high-yield savings account and added both of their names as authorized users with linked debit cards. I had specifically instructed them to only use the funds for absolute emergencies. Over the years, they had quietly used those debit cards to pay their expensive country club dues, buy premium groceries, and fund weekend golf trips. They treated my hard-earned savings like their personal allowance. I typed in my master administrative password and accessed the joint account dashboard. The current balance displayed on the bright screen was $38,200. I tapped the Transfer Funds button. I selected the entire available balance down to the very last cent and routed it directly into a private, secure checking account held entirely in my name at an entirely different banking institution. I watched the loading circle spin on the screen for 3 seconds before a green check mark appeared confirming the successful transfer. Next, I navigated to the account management settings. I clicked on the Authorized Users tab. Robert and Susan were listed with active debit card access. I tapped the red Revoke Access button next to my father's name. A warning prompt appeared asking if I was sure I wanted to permanently remove the user. I clicked Confirm. I repeated the exact same physical motion for my mother. In less than 2 minutes, I had completely drained the account and revoked their financial privileges. The balance hit absolute zero. My parents no longer had access to a single dollar of my money. The safety net I had generously built for them was entirely dismantled. The throbbing pain in my abdomen flared up sharply, reminding me that I was still a vulnerable patient recovering from major surgery. I carefully adjusted my position on the stiff hospital pillows, smoothing the thin blanket over my lap. I had neutralized the immediate financial threats, but freezing the bank accounts was only a temporary barrier. I needed a permanent, aggressive legal solution to destroy the trap they had set for me. I picked up my cell phone again and scrolled through my professional contacts until I found the direct cell phone number for Mitchell Sterling. Mitchell is a senior partner at a ruthless corporate litigation firm in downtown Orlando. He specializes in financial fraud, asset recovery, and aggressive civil litigation. I had provided forensic accounting testimony for several of his high-profile corporate clients in the past. I was brilliant, calculating, and utterly devoid of mercy when it came to destroying fraudsters. He answered the phone immediately. "Hannah," he said, sounding genuinely surprised. "I heard from the corporate grapevine that you were rushed into surgery this week. What are you doing calling me on a Friday afternoon?" "I am currently lying in a hospital bed," Mitchell, I replied, keeping my tone strictly professional. "And while I have been recovering from a surgery, my husband and my parents conspired to forge my signature on a $150,000 home equity loan. They transferred the pending funds to a fraudulent corporate entity and then used my stolen platinum credit card to board a luxury cruise ship to the Bahamas." There was a long, heavy silence on the line. I could hear the faint sound of city traffic through his office window. When Mitchell finally spoke, his voice was remarkably cold and focused. "Do you have physical proof of the forgery and the conspiracy?" he asked. "I have already forwarded the entire digital evidence packet to your secure encrypted firm email address," I said. "I have the forged closing disclosures, the fraudulent digital notary stamp applied by a man named Thomas Jenkins, and the corporate operating agreement for the shell company. Most importantly, I have complete text message logs from a synced Apple device detailing their entire premeditated conspiracy, including my husband's explicit written confession of committing the forgery." I heard the click of his computer mouse. "Give me 60 seconds to open the secure server," Mitchell said. I waited, listening to his steady breathing over the speaker. I heard him opening the PDF files. I heard him reading the text messages. "Good God, Hannah," he muttered softly. "Your own mother scheduled this theft around your surgical procedure. This is the most brazen documented case of familial financial fraud I have seen in a decade. They handed you a loaded gun." "I want you to pull the trigger, Mitchell," I said firmly. "I want a comprehensive legal assault. I do not just want a divorce. I want them prosecuted to the absolute fullest extent of the law." "You will get it," Mitchell assured me. His voice was accelerating now, fueled by the clear-cut legal victory sitting on his computer screen. "Here is exactly what we are going to do. First, I am drafting a massive civil fraud lawsuit, naming your husband, your parents, and your sister as active co-conspirators. I am filing for an immediate constructive trust over that new limited liability company to ensure they cannot legally move or hide any assets. What about the criminal charges? I asked, adjusting my intravenous line. I am bypassing the local police department entirely, Mitchell explained, because this involves a massive forged loan and an attempted wire transfer across state banking lines. This is a federal financial crime. I am personally drafting a criminal referral packet and handing it directly to my contacts at the Federal Bureau of Investigation White Collar Crime Division. I am also submitting a separate referral to the District Attorney's Office regarding Thomas Jenkins. That corrupt title agent will lose his professional license and face state felony charges for notary fraud. He will likely flip on your father the second the police knock on his door. And the divorce, I prompted. I am drafting the divorce petition based on severe financial infidelity and extreme marital misconduct, Mitchell said, typing rapidly on his keyboard. Because Greg explicitly stated in these text messages that he planned to steal your home equity and immediately file for divorce, we have documented proof of malicious intent. He will not get a single dime of alimony or asset division. I am also hiring a private process server. I will have the civil suits, the criminal referrals, and the divorce filings fully drafted and legally processed by Monday morning. I will have my server waiting for them at the port when their ship returns. Thank you, Mitchell, I said, feeling a dark, cold satisfaction settle deep in my bones. Bill your retainer directly to my secure private account. We ended the call. I leaned my head back against the wall of the sterile hospital room and looked up at the television screen mounted near the ceiling. The local news broadcast had moved on to the weather report, but the image of my family laughing on that luxury VIP deck was permanently burned into my memory. I had spent the last 2 hours executing a flawless financial and legal blitzkrieg. I had successfully frozen the massive wire transfer. I had locked the platinum credit card. I had completely drained my parents' joint emergency fund, and I had retained a ruthless fraud litigator who was currently drafting the legal documents that would send my husband to federal prison. The trap was perfectly set, and the steel jaws were ready to snap shut. But the legal filings would take the entire weekend to process through the court systems, and the federal authorities would not mobilize until Monday morning. That meant the most immediate and satisfying consequences of my counterattack would not take place in a sterile courtroom or a bank lobby. The immediate devastating consequences were going to happen directly on that luxury ship in the middle of the ocean. A fresh plastic cup of cherry gelatin sat on my rolling tray table as the first batch of Saturday evening vacation photos began actively sinking to the silver tablet resting on my lap. I peeled back the foil lid and scooped up a small spoonful just as the screen brightened with a high-definition image of my sister. Brittany was posing on the teak wood balcony of the VIP suite, wearing a shimmering gold evening gown that I had undoubtedly paid for. She was holding up a massive dark glass bottle of vintage wine with a decorative French label. The retail price for that specific vintage was easily $400. Behind her, the sun was setting over the crystal-clear waters of the Caribbean, casting a perfect golden hour glow across her perfectly contoured face. I swallowed the cold cherry gelatin and swiped my index finger across the smooth glass to view the next photograph in the synced album. The next picture showed my mother Susan and my father Robert sitting at a candlelit table in the ship's most exclusive dining room. My father was holding up a crystal glass of expensive scotch. My mother was wearing a diamond necklace that had been sitting in my personal jewelry box just 3 days ago. They looked incredibly relaxed and entirely unbothered by the fact that they had just committed federal wire fraud to steal my home equity. I tapped the screen again. The final photo in the sequence showed my husband Greg standing in front of a massive casino table holding a thick stack of high-denomination playing chips. His designer suit jacket was unbuttoned and he was smiling broadly at the camera. He looked like a man who believed he had outsmarted the entire world. He looked like a man who thought he had successfully secured his financial freedom by leaving his wife completely bankrupt. I set my plastic spoon down on the tray table. The digital clock on the sterile hospital wall clicked over to 8:15 in the evening. I watched the upper right corner of the tablet screen. The small wireless internet icon indicated a strong connection. I knew exactly what was about to happen. The regional bank had executed the hard lock on my platinum credit card late Friday afternoon. That meant the card was dead. It would no longer authorize any transactions anywhere in the world. But large cruise ships operating in international waters often process their massive batches of daily incidental charges all at once on Saturday evening. They tally up the premium drinks, the casino cash advances, the specialty dining fees, and the luxury spa treatments. Then they run the primary credit card on file to authorize the balance. I kept my eyes locked on the screen and waited for the inevitable impact. At exactly 8:22, the digital notification banner dropped down from the top edge of the tablet. It was a direct text message from Greg to my personal cell phone number. Because his tablet was perfectly synced, I could read his incoming message in real time. "Hey babe," his message began. "Is there some kind of issue with the National Bank? My platinum card just declined at the high-limit blackjack table in the main casino. The dealer said the transaction came back with a code 04, and the machine told him to confiscate the plastic card. I am standing here looking like a complete idiot in front of all these wealthy people. Please call the customer service line right now and clear the security freeze. It is probably just a random travel alert because we are in international waters. Just tell them it is me and have them unlock it immediately." I read his demanding words and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. He was standing in a crowded luxury casino demanding that I fix the very security freeze I had intentionally initiated to destroy him. I picked up my plastic spoon and took another bite of the sweet cherry gelatin. I did not reach for my cell phone. I did not type a single letter in response. I simply watched the screen and waited for the panic to set in. 2 minutes later, another notification banner dropped down. Greg was texting me again. "Hannah, you need to answer your phone right now. The pit boss just walked over here and told me they are cutting off my casino credit until I provide a valid payment method. This is incredibly embarrassing. Call the bank." I let the message sit on the screen unanswered. I adjusted my stiff hospital pillows and shifted my weight carefully to avoid pulling on my fresh surgical stitches. My hospital room was perfectly quiet. The heavy wooden door was closed tightly, keeping out the sounds of the busy nursing station down the hall. I had all the time in the world to watch their carefully constructed tropical paradise completely unravel. 5 minutes later, the primary family group chat, titled Family Vacay, suddenly lit up with a rapid succession of incoming messages. The private facade Greg was trying to maintain had officially crumbled. My mother Susan sent the first frantic message to the group. "Greg, why is the VIP concierge desk calling our suite right now? They just told me that the primary credit card on file has been permanently declined by the issuing bank. They are demanding that we come down to the guest services desk immediately to provide a new form of payment for the port fees and the suite balance. What is going on?" Greg replied to the group chat within seconds. His typing speed betrayed his escalating panic. "I do not know, Susan. I am trying to get a hold of Hannah right now, but she is not answering her phone. The bank must have flagged the card for international travel. I told her to set up a travel notice before her surgery, but she must have forgotten to do it. Just give the concierge your personal credit card for now, to hold the balance until I can get Hannah on the phone to fix this." My mother responded immediately. "I cannot give them my personal credit card, Greg. Robert and I do not have a credit limit high enough to cover a $28,000 luxury suite balance plus all these incidentals. You told us this trip was completely covered. You told us you had full access to Hannah's Platinum account. You need to fix this right now before they lock us out of our rooms." The group chat went silent for 30 seconds. I could perfectly picture Greg standing in the middle of the bright casino, sweating through his expensive designer shirt while the pit boss watched him scramble. Then Brittany entered the conversation. Her message popped up in a bright green bubble. "Greg, what did you do?" "The bartender at the premium lounge just cut me and Todd off. He said our room key charge privileges have been suspended by guest services. I was right in the middle of filming a video for my social media page, and the bartender literally took my drink away in front of everyone. This is completely humiliating. You need to pay the bill." I read Brittany's message and smiled. Her desperate need to project a flawless, wealthy image to her imaginary internet followers was completely shattering in real time. Todd, my brother-in-law, jumped into the chat next. His message was short and aggressive. "Greg, you better sort this out immediately. The guest services manager just sent a security officer to find us at the lounge. They are saying we owe over $12,000 in incidental charges from the last 2 days alone. They are saying if we do not provide a valid card, they are going to hold us at the port in the Bahamas tomorrow morning and involve local authorities for theft of services." The gravity of the situation finally hit the group chat. The cruise line was not just going to politely ask for a new card. They were dealing with a massive unpaid bill on a hyper-luxury private charter, and they had their own security protocols for dealing with passengers who tried to defraud them. My father, Robert, finally sent a message. Greg, I am looking at the itemized bill the concierge just slipped under the door of the suite. You charged $4,000 at the casino today. Brittany charged $2,000 at the spa. We owe port fees, suite taxes, and premium dining charges. They are threatening to detain us. Why is Hannah's card declining? I thought you said you transferred the home equity money into the new corporate account on Friday. Why can we not just use that cash? I watched the screen closely. My father had just explicitly mentioned the fraudulent home equity transfer in a written group message, confirming his direct knowledge and participation in the financial crime. I made sure my encrypted email server was still actively backing up every single word they typed. Greg responded to my father a minute later. The wire transfer does not clear until Monday morning, Robert. You know how the banking system works over the weekend. We do not have access to that cash yet. I just need Hannah to call the bank and lift the travel freeze on the credit card. My mother, Susan, sent a massive block of text. Her panic was morphing rapidly into vicious blame. This is entirely your fault, Greg. You told us this plan was foolproof. You said you had everything perfectly timed around her surgery. You messed up the hack. You must have triggered a fraud alert when you bought those expensive plane tickets at the last minute. Call her hospital room directly. Call the nurses' station. Tell them it is an emergency and they need to wake her up right now. If we get detained by port security in the Bahamas tomorrow morning, I am going to tell them this was all your idea. Greg fired back immediately, his loyalty to my mother completely vanishing the second he felt threatened. Do not even try to blame this all on me, Susan. You are the one who told me exactly what day her surgery was scheduled. You are the one who told me to max out her credit limit because she would be too heavily medicated to check her phone. You are listed as the corporate secretary on the fraudulent company paperwork we filed to steal her home equity. If I go down for this, you are going right down with me. I scooped up another bite of cherry gelatin and let the cold, sweet flavor settle on my tongue. I watched them tear each other apart from the comfort of my hospital bed. The perfect united family that had conspired to destroy my entire life just 48 hours ago was now aggressively eating their own. They were trapped in a floating metal box in the middle of the ocean with absolutely no money, no valid credit cards, and a rapidly escalating bill they could never hope to pay. Todd sent another message to the group chat. His tone was entirely panicked now. Wait, what do you mean fraudulent company paperwork? Brittany, what is he talking about? You told me Greg just got a big bonus from his consulting firm to pay for this trip. Did you guys steal money from Hannah to pay for this cruise? Brittany responded quickly. Todd, just stay out of it. It is family business. Mom and Dad said Hannah owed us this money because she has been hoarding her corporate salary while I have been struggling to build my influencer brand. Greg just figured out a way to get the cash early. Todd did not accept her excuse. I am looking at a security officer standing 10 feet away from us right now, Brittany. They are not letting us leave the lounge area until we settle the bar tab. If your family committed fraud to get on this ship, I am absolutely not going to jail for this. I am going straight to the guest services desk right now and telling them I had absolutely no idea the payment method was stolen. I am filing for divorce the second we get back to Florida. I am leaving you in the Bahamas if I have to. Do not speak to me again. Brittany began spamming the chat with crying emojis and desperate pleas. Todd, please do not leave me here. Mom, do something. Tell him it is going to be fine. Greg, fix this right now. You promised me I would get good content for my page on this trip. Now my husband is leaving me and security is watching me like a criminal. My mother ignored Brittany's panic and focused entirely on her own survival. Greg, she wrote, I just tried to log into the joint emergency savings account Hannah set up for me and your father. I was going to try to wire some of that cash to the cruise line to get security off our backs. The account is empty. The balance says 0. And my debit card access has been permanently revoked. Did you do something to that account too? Greg's response was delayed. I could imagine him frantically pulling up the mobile banking portal on his phone, desperately trying to understand what was happening to their money. When he finally typed back, his message was chillingly brief. I did not touch your joint account, Susan. And the mobile banking portal is telling me my digital access has been permanently locked due to suspected fraudulent activity. The group chat went dead silent for 2 full minutes. The realization was slowly filtering through their panicked minds. The travel freeze excuse no longer made any logical sense. Travel freezes do not empty separate savings accounts. Travel freezes do not revoke authorized user access. Travel freezes do not permanently lock digital banking portals for suspected fraud. There was only one person on Earth who had the administrative power to execute all of those actions simultaneously. Greg sent a direct message to my personal number again. Hannah, are you awake? Did you do something to the bank accounts? Please talk to me. I need to know what is going on. We are in serious trouble right now. I did not reply. I placed my empty plastic gelatin cup on the tray table and picked up my cell phone. I opened the camera application and took a clear photograph of my hospital room. I captured the sterile white walls, the intravenous line running into my arm, and the digital clock on the wall displaying the exact time. I opened the text messaging application and attached the photograph to a new message directed to the Family Vacay group chat. I wanted them to know exactly where I was. I wanted them to know exactly who had outsmarted them. I typed a single sentence beneath the photograph. I hope you are all enjoying the premium VIP suite because it is the last luxury room any of you will ever see for a very long time. I hit send. I watched the message deliver to the group chat. I watched the read receipts pop up one by one as Greg, Susan, Robert, and Brittany opened the message. I saw the typing indicator bubbles appear and then rapidly disappear as they struggled to formulate a response to the woman they thought they had successfully buried. They finally realized that the bank vault they had tried to crack open had slammed shut, locking them completely inside. The massive wire transfer was frozen. The credit cards were dead, the emergency funds were drained, and the police were waiting for them at the port. I set my phone face down on the tray table, closed my eyes against the harsh hospital lighting, and let myself rest. The war was officially over, and I had won every single battle. The attending physician signed my discharge papers early Sunday morning and handed me a small plastic bottle of pain management pills. I thanked him quietly and waited for the nurse to bring a wheelchair. Hospital policy dictated that a patient could not walk themselves out of the recovery ward after major surgery. Usually a loving spouse or a concerned parent would be standing right there holding a bouquet of flowers and waiting to drive the patient safely home. I had no one. I was wearing the spare set of loose sweatpants and the oversized cotton shirt that Greg had hastily shoved into my overnight tote bag before rushing off to commit federal fraud. I sat in the wheelchair while the young nurse pushed me down the long, sterile corridor toward the main hospital lobby. She asked me if my ride was waiting out front. I told her I had ordered a premium rideshare service. She gave me a look of quiet sympathy that I simply ignored. I did not need pity anymore. I needed to get back to my property. I stepped out into the bright, humid Orlando morning and climbed into the back seat of a black luxury sedan. The driver asked if the temperature in the cabin was comfortable. I told him it was perfect and asked him to take the fastest highway route to my suburban address. I stared out the tinted window as we merged onto the busy interstate. The bright Florida sun reflected off the endless rows of strip malls and palm trees. It was a beautiful Sunday morning. My family was likely waking up in their luxury suite right now, panicking over their declined credit cards and desperately trying to figure out how to pay their massive room service tab. I felt a deep, hollow calm settle over my entire body. I was no longer the obedient daughter trying to buy her parents' affection. I was no longer the supportive wife draining her own corporate salary to fund her husband's imaginary business empire. I was a senior financial analyst who was actively securing her assets. The black sedan pulled into my quiet suburban neighborhood 40 minutes later. The driver navigated past the manicured lawns and parked directly in front of my beautiful two-story house. The house I had spent years aggressively paying off. The house my husband had secretly mortgaged to the hilt while I was bleeding on an operating table. I paid the driver generously through the mobile application and carefully stepped out of the vehicle. Every single movement pulled at the fresh stitches in my lower abdomen, but the sharp physical pain only fueled my absolute determination. I walked up the concrete driveway and unlocked the heavy wooden front door. The house was perfectly silent and empty. The lingering scent of Greg's expensive designer cologne still hung in the warm air of the entryway. I locked the front door behind me and immediately pulled my cell phone from my pocket. I did not unpack my hospital bag. I did not sit down on the living room couch to rest. I opened my internet browser and searched for an emergency residential locksmith operating on a Sunday. I found a local company boasting a 24-hour rapid response unit. I dialed the number and requested an immediate total property rekey. The dispatcher quoted me a high weekend emergency rate. I authorized the charge without a second thought. A sturdy man in a faded blue uniform arrived in a white commercial van just 25 minutes later. He carried a heavy metal toolbox up to my front porch. I instructed him to change the internal locking mechanisms on the front door, the back patio door, the side garage entrance, and the heavy steel door connecting the garage to the main hallway. He worked quickly and quietly, drilling out the old brass cylinders and installing brand new high-security deadbolts. I stood in the kitchen drinking a glass of cold tap water and watching him work. Greg and my parents all had spare keys to my house. They treated my property like it was their personal community center. They would often walk in unannounced to borrow my tools, eat my groceries, or demand my financial help. That era of open access was permanently finished. When the locksmith finished the final door, he handed me a heavy ring containing 4 shiny brass keys. I paid his invoice using the secure private checking account I had established the day before. I locked the brand new deadbolt on the front door and listened to the heavy metal mechanism slide firmly into place. The physical finality of that sound sent a rush of cold satisfaction straight down my spine. My physical sanctuary was now completely secure. Nobody could enter this house without my explicit permission. I turned my attention to the next crucial phase of my strategy. I walked slowly up the carpeted stairs, gripping the wooden handrail tightly to support my recovering body. I pushed open the double doors leading into the master bedroom and walked directly toward Greg's massive walk-in closet. For 5 exhausting years, I had funded his ridiculous corporate facade. He constantly claimed he needed to project the image of a highly successful entrepreneur to attract wealthy consulting clients. Because I wanted him to succeed, I had foolishly handed him my credit cards to build his professional wardrobe. I pulled open the heavy wooden closet doors and stared at the sickening display of unearned luxury. Rows of custom-tailored Italian silk suits hung perfectly on velvet hangers. Dozens of crisp designer dress shirts were organized by color. High-end leather loafers and expensive golf shoes were neatly arranged on the lower wooden racks. I walked back out to the hallway and retrieved a large roll of heavy-duty black trash bags from the utility closet. I returned to the master bedroom and snapped the first plastic bag open. I did not fold anything carefully. I did not sort the items by season or fabric. I grabbed an armful of his custom-tailored suits and roughly shoved them down into the bottom of the plastic bag. The expensive silk wrinkled and crushed under the force of my hands. I felt a sharp twinge in my surgical incision, but I ignored the pain entirely. I grabbed his designer dress shirts, yanking them so hard the plastic hangers snapped and clattered loudly against the hardwood floor. I shoved them into the bag until the black plastic stretched tight. I tied the top in a harsh knot and dragged it out into the hallway. I snapped a second black bag open and moved to his shoe collection. I threw the Italian leather loafers, the expensive running shoes, and the premium leather belts directly into the garbage bag. Every single item represented a stolen piece of my own hard work. I had worked grueling 60-hour weeks auditing massive corporate ledgers, just so my husband could play dress-up and pretend he was a business mogul. I had sacrificed my own vacations and driven a sensible older car for years, just so he could lease a luxury sedan and fill his closet with imported fabrics. He had thanked me by forging my signature on a massive federal loan document and plotting to leave me completely bankrupt. I filled 5 heavy-duty trash bags with his entire wardrobe. I left nothing behind except a few wire hangers swinging on the empty wooden rods. Dragging those 5 heavy bags down the carpeted stairs took an immense physical toll on my recovering body. I had to move them one by one, sliding them carefully down the steps, while gripping the handrail to keep myself from collapsing. By the time I wrestled the final bag through the hallway and pushed it out onto the cold concrete floor of the garage, I was sweating heavily and breathing in shallow, ragged gasps. I left the black bags piled aggressively next to the spot where his leased luxury sedan usually parked. When he finally returned from his fraudulent tropical vacation, he would find his entire fake life stuffed into garbage bags exactly where it belonged. I walked back inside the house and locked the heavy steel garage door. I washed my hands in the kitchen sink and drank another glass of cold water. My physical energy was rapidly draining, but my task was not complete. Mitchell Sterling, my aggressive fraud attorney, had spent the entire weekend drafting the civil lawsuits and the criminal referral packets. I had already provided him with the digital evidence of the forged home equity loan and the highly incriminating text message logs. But Mitchell had specifically requested any physical financial documents I could find to strengthen the tax evasion claims. I walked down the main hallway and entered Greg's home office. The room was a monument to his complete incompetence. The dark mahogany desk was cluttered with empty coffee cups, unopened mail, and scattered business magazines. I sat down in his leather desk chair and pulled open the bottom filing drawer. Greg was careless with his digital passwords, but he was even more careless with his physical paperwork. He hoarded everything, believing it made him look like a busy executive. I began pulling thick manila folders from the metal tracks. I opened a folder labeled Business Expenses and began flipping through the pages. It was exactly as I suspected. He had been intentionally commingling personal luxury expenses with his failed corporate accounts to illegally avoid federal taxes. I found receipts for expensive jewelry he had purchased months ago, jewelry I had never received. I found documented proof of lavish steakhouse dinners, categorized as client meetings, when the calendar notes clearly indicated he was dining with his friends. I dug deeper into the back of the filing cabinet and found something even more valuable. It was a thick stack of bank statements from a smaller regional credit union. I had absolutely no prior knowledge of this specific account. I reviewed the printed ledgers with the cold, calculating eye of a senior financial analyst. He had been quietly skimming small amounts of cash from our joint household checking account for over 2 years and depositing those funds into this hidden private account. I was building his own secret financial safety net using my direct deposits. I gathered the tax evasion documents, the fake consulting receipts, and the hidden bank statements. I placed them all into a sturdy cardboard file box. This physical evidence was the final nail in his coffin. I would hand-deliver this box directly to Mitchell Sterling first thing Monday morning. The federal authorities were going to tear his entire financial history apart piece by piece. I stood up from the mahogany desk and picked up my cell phone. The screen was completely dark. I had intentionally silenced all incoming notifications before leaving the hospital. I tapped the screen to wake the device. I had 24 missed calls and 47 unread text messages. The vast majority of them were from my mother Susan and my sister Brittany. The cruise ship was currently docked at a port in the Bahamas, and my family was officially stranded. The cruise line required a valid credit card to cover the massive incidental charges they had racked up at the casino, the premium dining rooms, and the luxury spa. Because I had permanently locked my platinum card and completely drained my parents' joint emergency savings account, they had absolutely no way to pay the bill. While I was staring at the missed call notifications, the phone suddenly vibrated violently in my hand. My mother's contact photo flashed across the bright screen. I did not press the green accept button. I simply watched the screen light up the dark home office as the phone vibrated against my palm. I let it ring 5 times before the automated system routed her call to my digital voicemail. A small notification icon popped up on the top of my screen a few seconds later, indicating a new recorded message. I tapped the voicemail application and pressed play, holding the phone speaker in front of me. My mother's voice filled the quiet room. She was not using her usual demanding, authoritative tone. She was weeping loudly, and her words were frantic and high-pitched. "Hannah, please pick up," she sobbed into the receiver. "The cruise line is threatening to hold us at the port until we pay a $12,000 incidental bill. Greg's cards are dead. We tried to use the savings account you set up for us, but the bank teller on the phone said our access was revoked. Hannah, you have to call the bank and fix this right now. The security guards will not let us leave the guest services desk. They are saying they will involve the local island police if we do not provide a valid payment method immediately. Please, Hannah, we are terrified. Pick up the phone." The voicemail ended with a sharp click, followed by automated silence. I lowered the phone and set it gently on top of the cardboard evidence box. I stood in the quiet office listening to the steady hum of the air conditioning unit. My mother was terrified. She was weeping and begging for my help. Just 48 hours ago, she had eagerly conspired to forge my signature on a massive federal loan document while I was bleeding in a sterile hospital room. She had eagerly booked a luxury vacation using my stolen credit card, fully intending to leave me completely bankrupt and alone. She did not feel any terror or weep any tears for me when she planned my financial execution. She was only weeping now because the executioner had unexpectedly handed me the axe. I did not feel a single ounce of guilt or sympathy. The woman weeping on that voicemail was not a loving mother who had simply made a small mistake. She was a calculated predator who had finally been caught in her own vicious trap. I picked up my phone and completely turned the device off, plunging the screen into total blackness. I walked out of the home office carrying the heavy cardboard box of evidence. The locks were changed. The fraudulent clothes were bagged in the garage. The physical evidence was secured. The trap was set perfectly, and there was absolutely no escape for any of them. I carried the box into the kitchen, poured myself a fresh glass of water, and prepared for the final battle at the Port of Miami. My cell phone vibrated against the heavy cardboard evidence box, the bright screen cutting through the dim light of my kitchen. The caller identification displayed my sister Brittany's smiling contact photograph. She was calling me again. I had ignored dozens of calls from my mother and my husband over the last 24 hours, but Brittany was entirely different. Brittany had zero emotional endurance. She was a woman who had never faced a single consequence in her 26 years of life. She relied entirely on her carefully curated internet image and her premium lifestyle. Stranding her on a luxury ship without access to high-speed internet or room service was the equivalent of psychological torture for someone so deeply vain. I knew she was currently breaking under the immense pressure. I also knew she was incredibly selfish and would gladly sacrifice any member of our family to save her own reputation. I did not press the green button immediately. I needed to ensure this conversation was permanently documented. I reached into my pocket and retrieved my secondary corporate cell phone. I unlocked the screen and opened the digital voice recording application. I set the corporate phone down on the granite kitchen island right next to my primary device and pressed the red record button. The digital timer began counting the seconds. Once the secondary device was actively recording the audio in the room, I reached out and finally accepted the incoming call on my primary phone. I pressed the speakerphone button so her voice would project clearly into the quiet kitchen. I did not offer a polite greeting. I simply let the line connect and waited in absolute silence. "Hannah!" Brittany's voice exploded through the small speaker. Her tone was completely frantic. It was high-pitched and desperate and stripped of all her usual arrogant confidence. "Hannah, please tell me you are there. Please say something. I have been trying to call you all day long. My phone battery is at 9% and I cannot find a charging cable anywhere. Please talk to me." I leaned forward, resting my hands on the cool granite countertop. "What do you want, Brittany?" My calm, detached tone seemed to push her further into a panic. "What do I want?" she shrieked. Her voice echoed slightly, indicating she was hiding somewhere small, maybe a bathroom stall on the ship, to avoid the other passengers. "I want you to call the National Bank right now and fix this massive misunderstanding. We are in absolute hell right now, Hannah. The guest services manager is a complete monster. They permanently deactivated our room keys. We cannot get into our luxury suite to get our clothes or our toiletries. I have been wearing the same resort dress for 2 days. They cut off our premium drink packages, and they will not even let us access the free buffet dining rooms anymore." I poured myself a fresh glass of cold tap water from the sink, listening to her weep over a ruined vacation while I was recovering from surgery. "That sounds like a terrible experience," I replied smoothly, taking a slow sip. "But I am not sure why you are calling me about it. You are on a luxury vacation with your husband and your parents. Surely Greg or Dad can provide a valid payment method to clear your incidental charges." "They do not have any money," Hannah Brittany sobbed into the receiver. The line crackled with static. "Greg has a mountain of declined receipts. His cards are completely useless. Mom tried to use the emergency debit card you gave her years ago, but the bank teller told the ship concierge that the account was totally empty. Todd is absolutely furious with me. He is threatening to file for divorce the second we get back to Florida. He moved his things out to a lounge chair in the atrium, and he refuses to even look at me. The ship's security guards are watching us like we are common criminals. They told us we owe $12,000 for the casino cash advances and the spa treatments and the premium dining upgrades. They said if the balance is not paid in full by tomorrow morning, they are going to detain us at the port and hand us directly over to the Miami Police Department for felony theft of services. I watched the digital numbers ticking upward on the voice recorder. I needed her to keep talking. I needed her to explicitly connect herself to the forged loan documents. "A $12,000 bill is quite large," I said, keeping my voice devoid of sympathy. "But Greg told me he was taking care of everything. He told me he secured a massive amount of funding for this specific trip. Why can he not just use the cash he secured? Because the bank transfer does not clear until Monday morning. Brittany screamed, her frustration boiling over. He keeps saying the money is stuck in a pending holding status because of the weekend. But the ship administration does not care about pending transfers. They want a valid credit card right this second. Hannah, you have to use your platinum card to clear this balance. You have to call the bank and lift the fraud freeze right now. I cannot go to a Miami jail. I have brand sponsorships lined up for next month. A criminal record will completely destroy my social media career. I set my water glass down on the granite counter. The trap was perfectly positioned. I just needed to push her directly into it. I cannot lift the fraud freeze on my platinum card, Britt, I said softly, because someone stole that card out of my home safe while I was bleeding on an operating table. Someone used my stolen card to book a $28,000 cruise deposit. The bank considers that a federal crime. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Brittany was panicking, but she was not stupid. She realized immediately that I knew exactly what they had done. She realized the travel freeze excuse was a complete lie. Hannah, please, she begged. Her voice was shaking violently now. I am so sorry. We did not want to leave you alone in the hospital. We just wanted a nice family vacation. And Greg said you would not mind. Greg said you make plenty of money and you could easily afford to treat us. He said he would pay you back eventually. He is not going to pay me back, Brittany, I countered firmly, because he forged my legal signature on a home equity line of credit. He stole $150,000 of my hard-earned equity. The bank fraud department is already reviewing the forged documents. The federal authorities have been notified. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the faint sound of ocean waves in the background of the call. Brittany was finally grasping the catastrophic reality of her situation. She was not just facing a $12,000 unpaid room service bill. She was facing federal wire fraud charges. And true to her selfish nature, she immediately decided to save herself by sacrificing everyone else. Hannah, listen to me. Brittany pleaded, her words tumbling out in a rapid, desperate rush. You have to believe me. I had nothing to do with the stolen money. It was all Greg and Mom's idea. They planned the whole thing. Mom told Greg exactly when your surgery was scheduled so he could sneak away and finalize the paperwork with the title agent. They are the ones who wanted to steal your home equity. I just wanted to go on a nice trip to get some good photos for my page. I did not want to steal your house. I leaned closer to the phone, ensuring the secondary device captured every single syllable of her frantic confession. But your name is listed on the new corporate entity, Britt, I stated calmly. You are listed as a 10% stakeholder in Horizon Legacy Holdings. You are legally tied to the stolen funds. I did not know what that paperwork meant. Brittany sobbed loudly. Her crying was genuine now, fueled entirely by the terror of facing federal prison time. Mom told me to sign it. They made me sign the home equity line of credit witness line. They said they needed a second witness for the digital notary stamp to look legitimate. Mom promised me I would get a 10% cut of the cash if I just signed my name on the witness line. She said you would never find out because Greg was going to divorce you and leave you with the debt anyway. I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second. Even though I already knew the truth, hearing her say it out loud still sent a cold shock through my system. My own mother had bribed my sister with a 10% cut of my stolen life savings just to secure her participation in a massive federal crime. They had literally purchased her loyalty with my money. I recorded everything I needed. The verbal confession was absolutely pristine. She had explicitly named Greg and our mother as the primary conspirators. She had admitted to signing the forged home equity documents as a fraudulent witness. She had confirmed the premeditated plan to divorce me and leave me completely bankrupt. Mitchell Sterling was going to use this audio recording to absolutely destroy their criminal defense. Hannah, are you still there? Brittany cried into the phone. Please just pay the incidental bill so we can get off this stupid ship. If you clear the $12,000 balance, I swear I will testify against Greg. I will tell the police whatever you want. I will give you back my 10% cut of the company. Just please let me go home. Todd left me alone in the lobby, and my phone is about to die. I am so scared, Hannah. I looked at the digital timer on my recording device. 4 minutes and 12 seconds of undeniable criminal evidence. The war was definitively won. I picked up my primary cell phone from the granite counter and held it close to my mouth. I kept my voice perfectly flat and devoid of mercy. I am not paying your bill, Brittany. You can explain your fraudulent witness signature to the federal authorities when you disembark. I will see you at the dock tomorrow, Britt. I pressed the red button and ended the call. The kitchen plunged back into total silence. I reached over and stopped the digital recording on my corporate phone, securely saving the audio file to my encrypted cloud drive. Then I opened my contact list and scrolled to Todd. I was the only person in that entire group who had not known what he was boarding. I attached the audio file to a message and typed one line beneath it. "You should hear what your wife signed her name to." I hit send and turned the phone face down on the counter. The evidence box was full, the confessions were documented, the bank accounts were frozen. All that was left was the final reckoning in Miami. Monday morning arrived with the thick, suffocating humidity that South Florida is famous for. I stood inside the massive glass walls of the disembarkation terminal at the Port of Miami, watching the towering white hull of the Oasis luxury charters vessel slowly maneuver into its designated dock. My surgical incision pulled with a dull ache as I shifted my weight on the polished concrete floor, but the physical discomfort was completely overshadowed by the pure adrenaline pumping through my veins. Mitchell Sterling walked through the sliding glass doors of the terminal at exactly 8 o'clock. My attorney was wearing a sharp charcoal suit that looked entirely out of place among the tropical tourist attire, but perfectly suited for a corporate execution. Walking closely behind him were two uniformed officers from the Miami-Dade Police Department attached to the Financial Crimes Unit. Mitchell approached me and handed me a thick manila envelope. "We have the civil fraud suits, the divorce petition, and the emergency eviction notice, all signed and fully processed," he said, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous terminal. Because the forged home equity line of credit involved interstate digital wire transfers, the federal authorities have officially taken jurisdiction. "These local officers are here to detain your husband and secure the remaining suspects based on the felony warrants we pushed through last night." I nodded and accepted the heavy envelope. I looked at the two officers. Officer Ramirez and Officer Davis introduced themselves with polite professional nods. They had already reviewed the digital evidence, the forged notary documents, the text message confessions, and the audio recording of my sister Brittany admitting to the entire conspiracy. They knew exactly who they were waiting for. We stood near the customs exit, forming a quiet barricade of legal destruction, while the first wave of passengers began to disembark. The terminal quickly filled with the sounds of rolling suitcases, happy vacationers laughing, and families talking excitedly about their tropical adventures. They were tanned, rested, and wearing clean resort clothes. I watched them pass by for nearly 40 minutes, waiting for my own family to appear. When they finally walked through the security doors, the contrast was absolutely staggering. My family did not look like wealthy vacationers returning from a premium VIP suite. They looked like prisoners of war. They were flanked on both sides by 4 large cruise ship security guards wearing stern expressions and dark uniforms. The cruise line was not taking any chances with passengers who owed them a $12,000 incidental bill. My husband Greg was walking at the front of the pack. His expensive designer shirt was wrinkled and stained with sweat. His face was blistered red from a severe sunburn because he had apparently lost access to the premium sunscreen they kept in the locked suite. My mother Susan was shuffling right behind him, looking completely disheveled. Her hair was frizzy and unkempt, and she was wearing the exact same clothes she had been wearing in the photograph Brittany sent 2 days ago. My father, Robert, looked exhausted and defeated, dragging his heavy suitcase with his head bowed down in deep humiliation. Brittany was crying softly, clutching her oversized sunglasses, while her husband Todd walked 10 feet behind her, keeping a deliberate, angry distance from the rest of the group. They had clearly spent the last 48 hours locked out of their luxury rooms, cut off from the premium dining halls, and treated like common thieves by the ship administration. They looked miserable, sunburned, and entirely broken. The security guards escorted them directly toward the customs exit where we were waiting. Greg was busy arguing loudly with the lead security guard, pointing his finger and waving his hands in the air. "I am telling you, my wife is going to pay the balance right now," Greg shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "It was a massive banking error. She is a senior financial analyst, and she is meeting us right here with her checkbook. You are going to look like a complete fool when she clears this up." Greg turned his head and finally spotted me standing near the exit doors. A massive wave of relief washed over his sunburned face. He completely ignored the stern security guards and rushed forward, pushing past a group of startled tourists. He looked at me with wide, desperate eyes, entirely failing to notice Mitchell and the 2 police officers standing quietly in the shadows just behind my shoulder. "Babe, thank God you are here," Greg gasped, reaching out as if he intended to hug me. It has been an absolute nightmare on that ship. The bank completely locked the credit card and they treated us like criminals. I need you to go over to that security desk right now and pay the $12,000 room charge so they will let us leave. We can sue the bank for emotional distress later. Just get your checkbook out and fix this. I did not step forward to hug him. I did not reach into my purse for my checkbook. I stood perfectly still, keeping my posture straight and my expression entirely blank. I looked at the man I had funded and supported for 5 grueling years. I looked at the man who had secretly forged my signature to steal my home equity and planned to serve me with divorce papers. "I am not fixing anything, Greg," I said softly, my voice carrying clearly over the noise of the busy terminal. "And you are right about one thing. You are being treated like a criminal, but it is not because of a banking error." Greg stopped walking. He lowered his arms. The desperate relief on his face slowly morphed into deep confusion. "What are you talking about, Hannah?" he asked, blinking his bloodshot eyes. "Just pay the bill. We are exhausted and we want to go home." "You do not have a home anymore," I replied, taking a deliberate step back. "I changed the locks on Sunday morning and I packed all of your custom Italian suits into black garbage bags. They are currently sitting on the cold concrete floor of my garage." Behind Greg, my parents and my sister had finally caught up. My mother, Susan, pushed past the security guards and marched toward me. "Hannah, what is wrong with you?" she demanded, her voice shrill and echoing in the large room. "Stop being so dramatic and pay the cruise line. We have been sleeping on uncomfortable lounge chairs in a holding area for 2 days. Your father has a terrible sunburn and we are starving. Call the bank and unlock your platinum card right this second." I looked at my mother, the same woman who had carefully scheduled this massive theft to coincide with my surgery, the same woman who had promised my sister a 10% cut of my stolen life savings. "The platinum card is permanently canceled, Susan," I said, dropping the title of mother entirely, "just like your access to the joint emergency savings account. That balance is currently 0. You do not have a single dime of my money left." My father, Robert, dropped his suitcase handle. The heavy luggage hit the floor with a loud thud. "What do you mean the balance is 0? He stammered. "Hannah, what did you do?" "I did not do anything, Robert," I answered, keeping my tone perfectly clinical and detached. "I simply secured my assets after I read the group text messages syncing to Greg's tablet while I was lying in a hospital bed. I read every single message. I read the part where you laughed about maxing out my credit limit. I read the part where you scheduled the trip around my surgery. And I read the part where Greg admitted to using a digital notary stamp to forge my legal signature on a $150,000 home equity loan." The blood completely drained from Greg's sunburned face. He looked like he had just been struck by lightning. He opened his mouth to speak, but he could not force a single word past his lips. My mother let out a sharp gasp and brought her trembling hands up to cover her mouth. Brittany started sobbing loudly, hiding her face behind her husband Todd. Todd simply shook his head and took another large step away from the family, wanting nothing to do with them. They finally understood. The travel freeze excuse was dead. The banking error excuse was dead. I knew everything and they were completely trapped. Mitchell Sterling stepped forward from the shadows, moving smoothly into the fluorescent light of the terminal. He walked right up to Greg and shoved the thick, heavy manila envelope directly into my husband's chest. "Gregory, I am Mitchell Sterling, and I represent your wife, Hannah," he said, his voice cutting through the humid air like a serrated knife. "You have just been legally served. Inside that envelope you will find a formal petition for divorce based on severe financial infidelity. You will also find a massive civil fraud lawsuit naming you, Robert, Susan, and Brittany as active co-conspirators in an attempt to defraud my client. Furthermore, there is a court-ordered eviction notice for the primary residence. None of you are permitted to set foot on her property ever again." Greg fumbled with the heavy envelope, almost dropping it onto the polished concrete floor. He stared at Mitchell with wide, terrified eyes. "You cannot do this," he whispered weakly. "We are married. Half of that house belongs to me." "Actually, none of it belongs to you," Mitchell corrected him with a cold, predatory smile. "Because you committed felony wire fraud and forgery, the courts have already granted a constructive trust over your fraudulent limited liability company. The bank froze the $150,000 wire transfer on Friday afternoon. You failed to steal the money, Gregory. You failed completely." My mother let out a loud wailing sound. She grabbed my father's arm, digging her fingers into his sunburned skin. "Robert, do something," she cried out. Tell them this is a misunderstanding. Tell them we did not mean to steal her house." My father could not speak. He was staring at the two uniformed Miami-Dade police officers who were now stepping forward to flank Mitchell. The metal handcuffs hanging from their black utility belts jingled softly as they walked. The sound seemed to echo through the entire disembarkation terminal, drawing the attention of hundreds of curious tourists. Officer Ramirez glanced around the crowded terminal at the hundreds of disembarking passengers who had stopped walking to stare at us. "Not in here," he said quietly to his partner. "Take him outside." The cruise ship security guards closed ranks around my parents and my sister, holding them at the customs desk until the $12,000 balance was settled. Mitchell touched my elbow and nodded toward the exit. I walked out through the sliding glass doors into the hot Miami sunlight and turned around to wait. Officer Ramirez and Officer Davis, the two Miami-Dade financial crimes investigators, already had Greg out on the concrete apron beyond the doors. They were no longer offering polite warnings or waiting patiently for the cruise ship security to finish arguing about an unpaid incidental bill. The time for quiet negotiations and empty excuses had officially expired. My husband's expensive resort shirt was entirely soaked through with nervous sweat. His face was a mask of absolute terror. I was stumbling over his own feet as the two large police officers gripped him firmly by his arms. The brilliant Florida sun illuminated exactly how pathetic he truly looked. His deep sunburn was peeling and his designer clothes were wrinkled and stained. "The lead officer." Ramirez raised his voice so it carried clearly over the noise of the idling tour buses and the shocked murmurs of the disembarking tourists. He looked directly at my husband and delivered the legal reality that Greg had been desperately trying to avoid all weekend. "Gregory, you are officially under arrest," he stated, his voice sharp and unyielding, "because the forged home equity line of credit you executed crossed state lines via digital wire transfer attempts. This is no longer a local civil dispute. This is a federal felony wire fraud and forgery case under Title 18 of the United States Code. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has already flagged the fraudulent corporate accounts you established, and they have assumed full jurisdiction over this theft. The digital notary stamp you used left a perfect electronic trail directly to your device." Greg tried to pull away. He tried to twist his shoulders and beg for mercy, but the officers were not interested in his tears or his practiced corporate charisma. In front of hundreds of disembarking passengers who were stopping on the sidewalk to pull out their cell phones and watch the spectacle, Greg was pushed against the side of a concrete terminal pillar. The sharp metallic click of the steel handcuffs locking tightly around his wrists echoed loudly across the dock. It was the sound of his entire fake identity being permanently shattered. For 5 years, he had pretended to be a powerful, successful entrepreneur who simply needed a little financial support. Now he was just a desperate criminal wearing a painful, peeling sunburn and heavy steel bracelets. "Hannah, please!" he cried out, his voice cracking as the officers patted down his pockets, checking for weapons. "Babe, please talk to them. Tell them it was just a loan between husband and wife. Tell them I was going to pay you back with interest once my consulting business finally took off. I will do anything. I will go to counseling. Just do not let them absolutely nothing up me in a police car. I cannot go to a federal prison. I will not survive in there. Susan told me to do it. It was her idea to do it while you were in surgery." I looked at him with wide open eyes, but I offered him not a single ounce of sympathy, not a single shred of comfort. The man who had planned to drain my life savings and serve me with divorce papers was currently begging for his life, trying to throw his own mother-in-law under the bus to save his own skin, and I simply watched him sweat. Just as Officer Davis began to read Greg his Miranda rights, the glass terminal doors burst open again. My mother, Susan, came rushing out into the blinding sunlight. She was completely frantic. Her carefully maintained country club image, the pristine reputation she had spent decades cultivating at the local Methodist church, was entirely gone. Her hair was a frizzy, tangled mess, and her face was streaked with dark running mascara. She spotted me standing calmly near the curb and charged forward, pointing a trembling, manicured finger directly at my chest. "How could you do this to your family?" she screamed, her voice shrill and echoing off the towering white hull of the massive cruise ship. "How could you stand there and watch your own husband be arrested like a common street thug? We are your blood, Hannah. We raised you. You owe us respect. You are destroying us over a simple financial misunderstanding. You have a massive corporate salary. You have plenty of money to spare. You could have just paid the cruise line bill and fixed the bank error quietly, like a good daughter. You are a terrible, selfish monster." She lunged forward as if she intended to physically strike me, but Mitchell Sterling stepped smoothly in front of her, holding his thick leather briefcase like a shield. I did not back away from her. I did not flinch or lower my gaze. I stood perfectly still and let her desperate, angry words wash right over me without leaving a single mark. I looked at the woman who had intentionally timed the theft of my life savings to coincide with my surgery. The woman who had laughed in a synced text message about maxing out my credit limit while I was bleeding on a sterile operating table. "You aren't my family," I replied coldly, keeping my voice perfectly flat and devoid of emotion. "You're just bad investments, and I am finally cutting my losses." My mother stopped screaming. The sheer absolute finality in my tone struck her like a physical blow to the stomach. She lowered her pointing finger and stared at me as if she had never actually seen me before. She was finally realizing that the obedient, silent daughter she had exploited for decades, the human bank vault she had felt entirely entitled to crack open, no longer existed. In my place stood a senior financial analyst who had successfully dismantled her entire life in less than 72 hours. But my mother was not the only one about to lose everything. Mitchell Sterling cleared his throat and pulled a fresh stack of legally binding documents from his briefcase. My father Robert was trailing slowly out of the terminal behind my mother, dragging a heavy suitcase and looking like a hollow shell of a man walking to his own execution. He could not even look me in the eye. Mitchell addressed both of my parents directly, making sure the surrounding crowd of tourists and port security guards could hear exactly what was happening. "Susan and Robert," he said, his voice sharp and utterly merciless, "because you willingly co-signed the fraudulent limited liability company documents to receive the stolen home equity funds, you are officially listed as active co-conspirators in a federal financial crime. The state authorities have already frozen all of your personal banking accounts, but there is an additional immediate consequence you need to be aware of right now." My father looked up, his eyes wide and terrified. "What consequence?" he whispered, his voice shaking so badly he could barely form the words. "We did not take the money. The wire transfer never cleared." Mitchell handed a thick, sealed legal packet directly to my father, pressing it firmly against his chest until he was forced to take it. "The wire transfer did not clear because my client froze it," Mitchell explained smoothly. "But because the fraudulent corporate entity you created was explicitly tied to your personal assets, to secure the transaction, the National Bank has executed an emergency property seizure. You are officially informed that your own home, the property you currently reside in, is being seized by the bank, pending the conclusion of the federal fraud investigation to cover the massive legal damages. You do not have a home to return to in Orlando. The bank has already filed the seizure notice with the county. You will not be permitted to set foot on that property again." My mother let out a piercing, guttural wail. She dropped her designer purse and collapsed against my father, grabbing his wrinkled resort shirt collar and sobbing uncontrollably into his chest. The beautiful, pristine suburban house she used to host her church committee meetings, the house she had proudly decorated using the money she quietly stole from my emergency savings account, was gone. She had risked everything to fund a luxury cruise to the Bahamas, and she had ultimately gambled away her own home. They had tried to leave me entirely homeless and bankrupt, and they had successfully made themselves homeless instead. The lead cruise ship security guard had followed my parents out through the sliding doors. He looked down at my weeping mother and my sobbing sister without a single trace of sympathy. "If you do not have a valid payment method for that balance right now," he told them, "we are holding your passports and contacting the local authorities for theft of services. You are not leaving this port until that bill is settled." The total destruction of their world was almost entirely complete, but there was still one final piece waiting to fall. The heavy glass terminal doors opened one last time. My younger sister Brittany walked out sobbing loudly behind her large, expensive designer sunglasses. She was desperately clinging to the arm of her husband Todd. Todd was dragging his heavy rolling suitcase with his free hand, his face tight with absolute pure disgust. I was forcibly pulling away from her grasping manicured fingers, trying to put as much physical distance between them as possible. "Todd, please do not do this!" Brittany cried, begging him in front of the massive crowd of shocked onlookers and cruise ship security guards. I did not know they were going to forge the loan documents. I swear I did not know signing as a witness was a felony. I just wanted a nice vacation. I just wanted good photo content for my internet followers. Please do not leave me here with them. I have absolutely no money, and my phone is dead. Todd abruptly dropped his suitcase handle and turned to face her. He looked at my sister with a mixture of profound, blazing anger and deep, humiliating embarrassment. "You knew exactly what you were doing, Brittany," he shouted, his voice shaking with uncontained fury. "You sat in that premium VIP suite and drank $400 bottles of champagne while you knew your family was actively stealing from a woman bleeding in a hospital bed. I heard the audio recording Hannah sent to my phone this morning. I heard you admit that you took a 10% cut of the stolen cash to sign that forged witness line. You are a toxic, selfish person, and your entire family is completely insane. I just had to empty my personal checking account to pay the $12,000 incidental bill just so the cruise line security would release my passport. I will be suing you for every single penny of that money." I took a massive step back from her, completely severing their physical connection. "I am calling my divorce attorney the absolute second my plane lands in Orlando," Todd announced, pointing a finger directly at her tear-streaked face. "I am demanding an immediate divorce. I want nothing to do with you or your fraudulent criminal family ever again. Do not call my phone. Do not come to my house. We are entirely finished." Todd turned around, grabbed his suitcase handle, and marched directly toward the busy taxi stand without looking back a single time. Brittany fell to her bare knees right there on the dirty, sun-baked concrete, weeping hysterically and screaming his name as he disappeared into the crowded line of waiting vehicles. Her fake, glamorous internet influencer lifestyle, her wealthy, comfortable marriage, and her permanent golden child status were entirely eradicated in a matter of seconds. The family is utterly dismantled. I stood there in the beautiful, warm Miami sunlight and watched the complete, absolute ruin of the people who had tried to destroy me. My husband was sitting in the back of a police cruiser in heavy steel handcuffs, facing years in a federal penitentiary. My parents were crying hysterically on the sidewalk, entirely bankrupt and officially locked out of their seized home. My sister was sobbing on her hands and knees, abandoned by her husband and completely stripped of her glamorous social facade. They had conspired together to crack me open like an unattended bank vault, but they had only succeeded in burying themselves alive beneath a mountain of debt and federal charges. I did not step forward to offer them a final, polite goodbye. I did not shed a single tear for their self-inflicted misery. I simply turned around, gripped the handle of my luggage, and walked toward the waiting black luxury sedan that Mitchell had secured for me. I opened the heavy rear door, slid into the quiet, cool leather interior, and instructed the driver to take me directly to the airport. I was going home to the secure house I had paid for with my own hard work. I was going back to a highly successful corporate career and a secure bank account that belonged to me and me alone. The nightmare was completely, permanently over. The house of cards had entirely collapsed into dust, and the absolute peace of my new independent life was just beginning. The heavy brass gavel struck the wooden sounding block, echoing through the quiet federal courtroom and sealing my former husband's fate. I sat in the back row, wearing a tailored Navy suit, exactly 1 year after the ambush at the port of Miami, watching the federal judge hand Greg a 5-year sentence in a minimum security penitentiary for felony wire fraud. He did not turn around to look at me as the federal marshals escorted him through the side doors. His expensive designer wardrobe had been permanently replaced by a standard-issue khaki jumpsuit. He was officially a ward of the state, and I was officially a completely free woman. I walked out of the federal courthouse building and stepped into the warm afternoon sun, feeling a profound sense of absolute closure. The sweeping legal consequences of their calculated betrayal had completely dismantled the fake wealthy reality they had all relied upon, because my mother Susan and my father Robert had willingly co-signed the fraudulent corporate documents to steal my home equity. They were forced to liquidate absolutely everything they owned to pay for their aggressive criminal defense attorneys. The National Bank seized their pristine suburban house just 3 weeks after the cruise ship docked. They were abruptly evicted from the neighborhood where my mother had spent decades carefully cultivating her perfect church-going reputation. Today they are living in a tiny, cramped 2-bedroom rented apartment on the industrial side of the city. I heard through the remaining neighborhood gossip that my father had to take a part-time job at a local hardware store just to afford their basic utility bills. They have absolutely no extra cash for premium country club memberships or expensive Sunday golf trips. My sister Brittany experienced the most drastic lifestyle crash of them all. When her husband Todd followed through on his promise and filed for immediate divorce, he completely cut off her access to his lucrative corporate salary. Her desperate dreams of becoming a famous luxury lifestyle influencer evaporated overnight when she could no longer afford to buy expensive aesthetic products or travel to premium resorts. I actually saw her 2 months ago while I was shopping at a discount retail outlet. She was wearing a faded blue employee vest and standing behind the cash register, ringing up cheap plastic home goods for minimum wage. She looked exhausted and entirely defeated. When she looked up and made eye contact with me, she immediately dropped her gaze to the floor and pretended she did not know me. I simply paid for my items and walked out of the store without saying a single word to her. While their lives completely unraveled under the heavy weight of their own greed, my life expanded in ways I never thought possible. By legally severing myself from their endless financial demands, I finally secured the beautiful home I had worked so hard to pay for. I changed all the locks, upgraded the security system, and decorated the empty rooms exactly the way I wanted them. Without the constant heavy drain of funding, Greg's imaginary business ventures, or paying off my parents' secret credit card debts, my personal savings accounts grew exponentially. My corporate firm recognized my absolute dedication to my career and awarded me a massive promotion to Senior Regional Director, complete with a substantial salary increase, to celebrate my hard-won freedom and my new corporate title. I finally took the luxury vacation I actually deserved. I did not go on a crowded cruise ship to the Bahamas. I spent 3 glorious weeks exploring the sun-drenched coast of Amalfi in Italy alone. I stayed in premium historic villas overlooking the sparkling Mediterranean Sea. I ate incredible local food, drank beautiful regional wines, and spent my long, lazy afternoons walking through the ancient cobblestone streets. I paid for the flights, the hotels, and every meal in cash I had earned myself. I sat on a private balcony in Positano watching the sunset and realized that peace is not something you are simply handed. Peace is something you aggressively build and fiercely protect. I want to take a moment to speak directly to anyone watching this who feels crushed by the heavy weight of their own family's expectations. If you are the quiet financial pillar of your family, you need to listen to me very carefully. If you are the person who always sacrifices your own savings, your own comfort, and your own youth to keep everyone else afloat, you must realize that true love does not exploit you. Love does not quietly wait for you to become physically vulnerable just to steal your hard-earned equity. Love does not secretly forge your legal signature on federal banking documents while you are bleeding in a sterile hospital bed. Setting firm financial boundaries with the people who raised you is not an act of selfish betrayal. Boundaries are absolute survival. You are not a human bank account designed to fund someone else's fake luxury lifestyle. You are a person who deserves to be treated with genuine respect and true honesty. Have you ever caught a family member in a devastating financial lie? Have you ever had to legally separate yourself from the people who were supposed to protect you? Tell me your story in the comments below, because speaking the truth out loud is the very first step toward taking your power back. Please take 1 second to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you believe that justice always finds a way to balance the scales. Do not forget to comment your current location and the exact time you are watching this video. I love reading every single comment you leave. Protect your assets, guard your peace,